So good midday, everybody. My name is Robert Crowder. I'm going to be your presenter today. We'd like to take this opportunity on behalf of all of us at the Benefits Trust to welcome you to our summer series Zoomcast. And it's great to see so many familiar faces. All of us at the Benefits Trust take this very uh, seriously because we're asking you to come and spend an hour with us, and it's about being in a room where everybody gets smarter. It's not about being the smartest person in the room. So we'd appreciate it if you can keep your camera on so we can see you and see your reactions and so on. If you've got any questions throughout the session today, put thoughts, questions, ideas. That doesn't necessarily have to be questions, ideas, thoughts, whatever it is. Just put your little hand emoji up, and we'd be happy to hear what you have to say and answer those. Or if you've got a question, just type it in the chat box. And with us today from the Benefits Trust, Jordan Bolhose is here, and Robert Crowder running things behind the scenes. So if you got something, put it in the chat box as well, and so everybody can see it, because somebody else might have a similar thought and want to hear what the response is. For signing up for today, you're going to get your CE credit at the end of the session. Mike Ignatz, who is not with us today, is going to be sending those out very shortly. You're going to get signed up for our Trusted Advisor newsletter, which many of you already get, but if you haven't received it, you certainly will. And you're going to get a really short survey, less than 2 minutes to fill it out. Tell us how we did today, how we can do it better tomorrow, and more importantly, give us some ideas on what you'd like to see in the future. So when we continue with these Zoomcast series, we can do things that are meaningful to you. Today's subject is customized plan design ideas and the groups within the group. And this really came back from feedback from you that you wanted to see something along these lines. These sessions, if you know somebody that would be interested in, will be repeated in August. We got a couple of dates in August. And then we've also got some due dates coming up that'll be posted on our website, and you'll all hear about it shortly. So anyways, let me share my screen and let's get started. Today, we are again talking about customized plan design ideas, groups within the group. And again, this is about being in a room where everybody gets smarter. It's not about being the smartest person in the room, because as we all know in the insurance industry, we share a great deal of information. And speaking of sharing information, before we begin, Lawrence, if you could just jump on real quick, because I think this is just such a fantastic thing that you have done. And just maybe, Lawrence, are you there?
I'm here.
Yeah, if you could just share with you the Masters of Insurance and tell us what that's all about, because it is just magnificent.
We're on hiatus now until the middle of September, but for the past year and just over a half, we've been interviewing people who are masters of insurance, people who've succeeded, not necessarily the highest producers, not necessarily the best known, but people who've been very successful in various markets. The idea is to try to show people, whether they're new or people looking for raison d'etre, something to hang their hat on in the insurance business, that there's almost an infinite number of ways to be successful. You just have to dig in, be consistent, and pursue it.
And where can we find these videos?
They're right now on YouTube under Masters of Insurance. Meet the Masters of Insurance, but Masters of Insurance. Otherwise, why don't I put a link for registration in the chat box.
Thank you, Lawrence. And thank you for doing what you do, because again, it's about sharing information. Lawrence has been in this business forever. He's truly a legend, and he's doing this out of the goodness of his heart, because he wants to see everybody succeed. It's not about just hoarding all this information. It's about sharing this information. So customized plan design ideas, groups within the group. Let's get started. Our agenda today is, what is a benefit plan? We want to talk about the right questions to ask, some creative plan design ideas. We've got some case studies that we want to share with you, I think 3. And then, of course, questions, answers, and discussions. And if you've got any questions, put it in the chat box or put up your little hand emoji so it pops up on my screen and we can get to you. A little bit about the Benefits Trust. We started on January 1st, 1994, so we've been around for some time. We're a full-service third-party administration company. We're the largest independently owned TPA in Canada. In 2024, just last year, our friends at Benefit and Pension Monitor magazine named us a top employer in the benefits industry, but they also named us a top provider. So we're really excited and proud about that. And what we do is we provide end user clients, which are your clients, with customized benefit solutions. We've got exceptional client experience, and that's what we do as I like to say, we do the 5% extraordinarily well. So when hey, we do things great. We pay claims, we do, send out bills, we do all the things that you would expect us to do. We've got a great app. But when something goes sideways for whatever reason, um, whether it's a billing issue or a claim issue or whatever it is, you pick up the phone, somebody's going to answer the phone. They are going to deal with the issue and get it resolved right away. As opposed to the experience I had very recently with our friends at Rogers, where I spent 45 minutes on the phone on hold before I spoke to someone who couldn't solve my problem. So it was, a difficult experience. We've got long-term relationships with all the major Canadian insurance carriers and service suppliers, so we're not tied to any one particular market or service supplier. And our target market is working with advisors like you, professional advisors with clients from 1 to 100 employees. We do work with a lot of companies that are more than 100 employees. We've got quite a few of those. But our target market is really working with those smaller employer groups because, quite frankly, that's where the market is. In Canada, in Ontario alone, there's 440,000 businesses with 1 to 100 employees. So that's where we focus. What is a benefit plan? So when we were putting these slides together, and Rob did a lot of this work, but when we were putting these slides together, you go onto AI and you go, what is a benefit plan? And you can all read this, and it's a pretty, AI's got lots of great answers. They just don't have the right questions. But a benefit plan, no one has an employee benefit plan, is a program that blah, 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 blah. You can read that. It's a pretty boring plan. We look at it a little bit differently. This is our take on it. An employee benefit is a promise between the employer and the employees. I don't remember where this came from back in the back of my head, but probably 15 years ago, I was at a meeting with an advisor and a prospect. And the meeting was not going well. The advisor was a little bit disjointed in his conversation and the question, and you could see the client or the prospect posing, folding his arms, and he was leaning back in his chair, and it just wasn't going well. And the you know prospect is thinking this is just a complete waste of time. And I said, whoa, 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 hold on a second, stop. What are we talking about here? And the client looked at me, or the prospect looked at me, and with a kind of stupid look on his face. And he goes, we're talking about this life insurance and dental and drugs and stuff. And I said, no, we're talking about a promise between you as the employer and the employees. And I use that word promise, and it's a powerful word because if I promise Lawrence something, or if I promise Blake something or Sue something, I got to keep that promise. I promised all of you that I would be here at noon today. If all of a sudden I didn't keep my promise, you guys are going to go, well, the benefits trust is crap. Promise is a big word. It's a powerful word. And when you promise something to somebody, it's almost emotional, right? When you promise something to somebody. So the light went off in this prospect's head, and he goes, "Oh my God, now I get it. I can promise whatever it is that I want that makes sense." And it was really interesting because it was a real light went off in my head watching this particular individual's reaction. And I've used this language over and over again, and it's worked. Clients like when you use language that they understand, and promise is just a very powerful word. I mean, you see a great comedian, they've got an incredible understanding of the English language, and one word can make a joke successful or not because of their use of the English language. So our take is it's a promise between an employer and employee. Use that word, it works. Our job as advisors is to help our clients design, implement, communicate, and keep this promise. Our job as advisors also to manage and facilitate the changes to this promise as it happens from time to time. Because once you implement a plan, it's not done. Your work is not done. It's really just beginning. And it's a great way to help your client think creatively. It's as simple as that. It's a great way to help your client think creatively. So if we go back, there's the boring answer, and if you go forward, you say, hey, great. A benefit plan is a promise between an employer and an employee. Benefits and compensation. Well, benefits form, it's part of the compensation. It's part of the compensation that an employer is going to give a group of employees. And, when you think about it, no matter how big or small the employer is, people are compensated differently within that organization. I know Blake's got a lot of employees and they all make different amounts of money. Blake, how many employees do you have?
We're at 12.
12. You got 12 people in your organization and do they all make the same amount of money?
No, but it's all far too much, let me tell you. Hi, Sophia.
But everybody's different within the organization. If you look at the CEO of the Royal Bank of Canada versus the newest customer service rep that just hired, yeah, they've got very different compensation structures. So a benefit plan can mirror your compensation structure and can mirror your pay structure, if you would. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same. There's this misnomer out there that I've seen with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of employers over the years. They think, oh, we only have 10 employees, or we only have 12 employees like Blake, or we've got 15 employees, and we got to all have the same benefits because we're too small. We're too small. Yeah, too small is irrelevant, right? It doesn't make any sense to me, and it doesn't make any sense to them when you open up their eyes and open up their minds. Um, so you can do this with two employees, three employees, five employees. We're not subject to it. Oh, this has got to be 25 employees or more, right? So it's benefits and compensation are important. I think it's important to have those types of conversations with your client. And one of the best questions that I like to ask, quite frankly, when you're in these types of conversations with clients and prospects is what are the groups within your group? Right? Most likely, they've never even been asked that question because I've asked this question hundreds of times, and people go, well, "What do you mean?" And I go, "Well, this is your business. You started it, you bought it, whatever it is. But there's different groups within your organization. In our organization, we've got 37 employees or whatever the number is today. I think, well, one came back from mat leave, and anyway, it doesn't matter. But we got 37 employees, and there are different groups within the group. We've got directors of underwriting and directors of sales and directors of administration and directors of technology. We've got, the ownership group, which is myself and Francis. We've got, salespeople that are paid on commission or activity as well as a salary. We've got people that have been with us for 15 years, 20 years, 30 years. We've got people that have been with us for, a week. So there are different groups within the group. So it's a great question to ask. And again, it's about getting your client or prospect to think creatively. It's about getting them to think creatively. And then you can look at different groups within the group, such as, ownership, who owns the business, management, supervisors, key long service employees. You ever walked into a company and you talk to them and they go, yeah, you know, uh, we've been running this business for the last 25 years and we've got all these different people, but geez, we really need to take care of, this one particular employee because they've been with us 25 years and they're like family and we can really depend on them. Sales team, administration, part-time, seasonal. We've got professional staff that's not included in here that I was thinking about afterwards as well. Um, you know, it's all these different types of groups within the group, and they all are different. They all are different. So again, it's asking your client, what are the groups within the group? And they may not have thought about this before, but it's a common misconception that people think they need benefits to be the same right across the board. It's not necessarily true. It's not necessarily true at all. It depends on what their compensation philosophy is, and if their compensation philosophy and their benefit plans are out of sync, you're sending a message about pay over here, but you're not supporting it with your benefits, right? And it creates that gap in a lot of places, and it devalues the plan that you've put in place, essentially, I should say. And this is a common misconception, again, with companies with few employees. So I like to start with the owner class. With the owner class, the business owners hate being told how to spend their money. All of us here are business owners to a great extent. And one thing I've learned about business owners is I don't mind spending money as a business owner. I don't mind spending money. I like spending money. But I like to get value for what it is that we're spending money on. So you can't say that this is how to spend your money. Traditional defined benefit plans, if you would, and yes, we're talking about employee benefit programs, but the plan's very defined. It's got, 80% reimbursement of this or a $500 max of that, or whatever it is. There's limits, there's maximums, there's frequencies built in. You can't go to the dentist, until this 6-month period is passed because of the number of recalls that you can have. Again, business owners hate that. Business owners hate when you tell them they can't do something that they want to do. And all of this, leads, uh, all lead to denied claims and frustration. They're going, hey, I'm paying all this money and I'm not covered for this. Or I'm paying all this money and I went to the dentist 3 days early and it's now, now I got to fight with the insurance company to get this thing played. Our philosophy is, and we've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of clients that are set up in this fashion, that business owners should never pay for a CRA eligible expense out of their pocket. It's as simple as that. They should never pay for an expense out of their pocket. That's a CRA eligible expense. So, for example, we before we get into the cost plus arrangements, I've got 3 pairs of glasses. I use these glasses when I'm using my computer screen. I don't use them when I'm watching television. I don't use them when I'm riding my bike or fishing for that matter. I use it when I'm using my computer. So what I've done is I bought 3 pair of glasses. They were $600 each when I got my new prescription. They were $600 each. I bought 3 of the exact same pair. I keep one in my office, one in my home office, and one in my briefcase or my bag that I use every day. So I didn't want to have to look for my glasses. I wanted that covered. Right? I don't want someone telling me how to spend my money. That's how I wanted, that's how I chose to spend it. So what's the best, most effective way to have that benefit covered, to have that expense covered? In this case, it was $1,800, right? Well, owners with cost plus plans, yeah, it achieves a result, but it's cumbersome. Cost plus plans are cumbersome. And let me just give you an example internally. So great, using that $1,800 expense, I would claim it through my benefit plan and I would get an explanation of benefits that the, first $200 or $150 or whatever our benefit plan is paid. And the balance can be run through cost plus. So then what I've got to do is I've got to take that explanation of benefits and I've got to take the sales receipt again, and then I've got to fill out an insurance company cost plus claim form. And then I have to fill out a check requisition or payment requisition because I don't make payments, I authorize payments. We've got an accounts payable person that does that. So I've got to fill out our internal check requisition, if you would, or payment requisition. And I've got to attach all this documentation and I've got to send it, in this case, to Pat or Brittany, one of the two. And then they check to make sure it's accurate and then they process the payment. But meanwhile, Brittany or Pat now know that I got $1,800 worth of glasses and I've gone through 2 steps to get that reimbursed. And they're going, well, that's great. Geez, my kids need glasses and I can get a really crappy pair once every 2 years. And Rob just goes up and gets, $1,800 worth of glasses because he doesn't want to be inconvenienced. Again, they know my business. Do I want them to know my business? Not necessarily. What if it's something more sensitive? What if I'm in therapy because of some stress that I'm under? I don't want anybody to know that. So cost plus works, but it's cumbersome and it may not be as private as one would hope, right? A lot of companies will go, hey, great, we'll set up an owner class, and what we're going to do is just put a healthcare spending account on top of it. Well, again, depending on how it's set up and depending on what supplier is being used, it can be cumbersome as well. They've got to, submit their claim to the provider, and then they get it back, and then they submit the balance to the healthcare spending account provider, or they can do it seamlessly with certain companies, but it's administratively burdensome because the owner has to do all the work. The owner has to do all the work, and they often have to submit it to the core plan first, get the EOB, then submit it to the healthcare spending account. As well as that, the healthcare spending account can be hard capped. Hey, great, you got a $5,000 healthcare spending account. Well, all of a sudden, a couple of years ago, my wife came back from the dentist, and after seeing a specialist, and she needed some things done in her mouth, but she needed 6 caps done. And the 6 caps, were $12,000 or whatever the number was. I think it was actually more than that. But hey, I didn't expect that. I didn't know what was going on. So all of a sudden, if I've got a $5,000 healthcare spending account, that's not going to cover all of it. So it's a hard cap max. So often business owners, again, find this confusing and frustrating. They get multiple statements. They're submitting things twice, sometimes multiple providers. And they lose things and they go, geez, I'll just pay out of pocket. And this is, again, I'm paying for things that I shouldn't be paying for with ineffective tax dollars. What we say is touch it once, make it easy. Set up an owner class, and we just say it's 100% unlimited plan. I'm going to buy 3 pairs of glasses. but I'm going to set it up so it's 100% reimbursement for all of my medical and dental expenses as an owner. Right? It's a fully budgeted ASO solution. It's the most tax effective solution for business owners. They touch it once, easy to submit the claims. They use the app, whatever it is. But you submit the claim, you get reimbursed. It's as simple as that. We've got a drug card obviously in place with our friends at Claim Secure. You can pick stop loss and out of country at the levels that you're comfortable with. And you can buy out of country coverage for 30, 60, 90, 120, 180 days, depending if you spend winters away. And it can be set up as a standalone product as well, or just as a separate class. So we say, make it super easy to have the owner claim the things that they are going to pay for anyway, right? And a lot of times business owners live in multiple homes. Great. They want a CPAP machine in each of their homes. Fantastic. I've got a customized DonJoy knee brace that I use because I've got a no ACL in my left knee, and I've got one here in Ontario and one at my ski chalet. Great, because I don't want to carry it back and forth. Because if I do, I'll forget it, and then I won't be able to ski. So it's just you're doing what you're going to do anyway, but just in a tax effective way. So how do you set up these unlimited plans with multiple owners? Well, you set them up in their class, right? And then one of the things that we can do is provide a utilization report for their internal accounting purposes. So, for example, we can set this up on a quarterly basis. We can set up this utilization report on a semi-annual basis or an annual basis, depending on what it is that they do. So my business partner and I, Francis, we spend money in different ways, and we have an equalization process set up between us. If I spend $15,000 on benefits and he spends $5,000 on benefits, great. Over that $10,000 difference is accounted for in different ways. But it's great for business with multiple family members or firms with multiple partners. You can still do this and achieve the great result. So the unlimited plan is the easiest and most efficient way for business owners to pay for their claims. It's as simple as that. It's easy to use and easy to understand. Once they have the Kool-Aid, they don't want to go back. Owners are often surprised on how much they end up claiming with the unlimited plan. They're often surprised because they don't have any idea. And they all of a sudden they look at it and they go, wow, this is great. And we've had renewals that we've done where the claims for the business owners or the family, if you would, have been $30,000 and the claims for the rest of the group have been $30,000, right? So that's not uncommon. So the owners really like this, and then they understand the tax efficiency of it. They understand the simplicity of it and the ease of use. So what happens is they're less likely to answer door knocks, saying, hey, I can save you 10%. There's still a lot of advisors out there that are doing that, and they're answering they're knocking on the door and they're saying, hey, great, I can save 10%. Well, they're going to say no, because I want my 3 pair of glasses covered. Other groups within the group: management, supervisors, again, key long-serving employees, salespeople. Salespeople are often compensated differently than administration or administrative people, part-time people, seasonal people. I live in Huntsville, Ontario, and there's a lot of seasonal jobs up here. And it's interesting because they want to get the same staff back year after year because it reduces their training costs and so on. So you can set up a plan that covers some of those seasonal people for the next year when they come back. So employers in different classes might be compensated differently, so the benefits also need to be different, or the client may choose to make them a different promise, if you would. The needs of management can be very different than the entry-level employee, as we talked about. But what we're saying is coverage choices may wish to mirror those compensation strategies that the client has. We've often seen groups where they say, hey, we want to be the top player in this particular marketplace, or top player, therefore the top payer, and attract the best people in this particular marketplace. But they've got this vanilla employee benefit plan. So they've got mixed signals and it's not working, and they're not maximizing the value of their money they're spending on their employee benefit program. So coverage ideas for other groups, different pooled options for different groups. So flat life benefit for employees and 2 times earnings for management, right? For example, these are just examples. What's right, what's wrong, it doesn't matter, because there is no right or wrong. It's whatever the client wants, whatever makes sense for them. We've got a lot of not a lot, but we've certainly got some companies where they say, hey, great, you know what? We're just going to put $25,000 of flat life insurance because we think it's an individual choice that our managers need to make on how much insurance that they want to buy for themselves for their own financial planning reasons. So great. That's an option as well. Higher AD&D benefits with accident income replacement indemnity for laborers. We do a lot of business in the construction world right now, and it's amazing. We put a $250,000 AD&D policy, on with $25,000 of life, and it's amazing because, God forbid, something happens. Whether it be at work or not at work, it doesn't matter. But God forbid something happens. You got a construction worker that dies, whether it's on the job or off the job, it doesn't really matter. But all of a sudden, the business owner is going and delivering a meaningful check to that particular individual's families. So it's something to think about. It doesn't necessarily have to match the AD&D policy that is in place. It doesn't have to match the life. Lawrence, you had a question or a comment?
Many years ago, we dealt with firms that had with the couriers who ran all over the city on behalf. It was a law firm or law firms, and they
Yeah.
ran all over the city. And we started to worry about the question of the firm's liability for those people while they were out of the office. And we raised specific out of office coverage. It's a question of understanding the client like anything else.
You got it. Thanks, Lawrence. I appreciate you sharing that with me. And it was really interesting. We had just a sidebar because I think we have a bit of time, but just a sidebar. We had a client that had difficulty administratively. We said, let's just change your benefit plan so we have AD&D on the first day. So when you sign them up for all of the things you sign up a new employee for, you got to fill out an enrollment form and put a beneficiary on it. And then we'll start the benefit process on day one. And then we'll have all the benefits kick in on day three, but they get AD&D on day one. Well, something, sadly, one of the employees got killed just before a long weekend, like Friday of a long weekend, right out in front of the parking lot of the company. They got pulled out, didn't see a truck coming. The truck T-boned them and killed them. Right, but that was their first week of work. They were able to deliver a check to that person's beneficiary. It was horrific. It was terrible, but they felt good. The client felt good because they were able to deliver this check. Anyways, you can say, hey, no pooled coverage for business owners because they don't need it. They don't want it, whatever it is, but there's no right or wrong answer. But you can set up, different groups within the group, and you can have different coverages, and pool coverages can vary differently. Other coverage ideas, enhanced health and dental coverage. Like we've all seen this. Great. We're going to pay this group 100%. We're going to pay this group 80%. Changing overall limits. Example, paramedical limits or dental limits. Great. We're going to say, here's a combined $2,000 dental limit. We don't care what you use, whether it's minor, major, restorative, whatever, but it's just a $2,000 max. Use it as you wish. Go as many times as you wish. Whatever the circumstances are. We've got combined maximums. So you can say, hey, great, you can spend whatever you want. So instead of having a $500 or $300 paramedical maximum or per practitioner, you say, hey, great, you get $1,000 paramedical practitioner maximum or $1,000 in total maximum for whatever you want to use in the paramedical suite of opportunities. So there's all sorts of different ways that you can do, but it's whatever the client wants to promise the employees. It's as simple as that. Additional services, orthodontics. Great. Orthodontics are great for kids, but you know what? There's a lot of adults that have orthodontics, and you can add that onto a plan for key people like management, for example. You want to keep the management, you want to motivate them. Great. It's only going to cost a few $1,000s, one time, and then it's done. It's a great way to do this. Adult orthodontia. We can also put formulary protect on management and nothing on owners. You could do all sorts of different things. Really, the sky is the limit, and it's really the creativity that you bring to the table and allow the client to paint the picture that they want to paint that matches their compensation philosophy, and so on. Healthcare spending accounts. You can add healthcare spending accounts to classes of employees. Everybody's needs are different. My needs are very different than my son's needs. He's got a young wife and well, sorry, she's not that young. She's older than you, but a wife that is their family needs are very different than ours. My wife and I, because we're old and they're not. So great, Rob can spend his money his way and we can spend our money our way, for example. But we've got that 100% plan, so we've got no need for it, right? But um, one thing about healthcare spending accounts, especially for employer groups, and it's easy to understand. It's a forecastable cost. It's not going to change. The only thing that's going to change is if the employer has the pen and decides to change that particular amount. Tiered healthcare spending accounts is something that we're doing a fair amount of now, and it's great because as we're having more and more of these conversations, and advisors like you are having more and more of these conversations, they go, "Hey, this is great. We want to set up tiered healthcare spending accounts because you can have different amounts within the same class." But you say, hey, great. So we're going to reward people for longevity in the organization, for example. So we're going to say, hey, employees, they got this core benefit plan and they got a $500 healthcare spending account plus $100 a year for each year employed, right? Management, it's the same thing, but $200 for each year employed. It's a great employee retention idea because what often employees are doing is they're thinking about their healthcare spending account and they're thinking about their healthcare spending account the next year and they're planning for things. So what's happening? They're not looking at potentially other offers or they're looking at other offers, certainly less. It's a great retention idea, but from your perspective, it's a great idea because it's very difficult to duplicate. So no one's walking into one of your accounts, Sue, and saying, hey, great, we can save you 10%. And meanwhile, they're going, yeah, but we can't match the plan design. So it's a great employee retention idea. And the other thing is healthcare spending accounts as a percentage of earnings. Blake has shared with us that he's got 12 employees in his organization. Great, you offer everybody this base plan, and then you give them 1% or 2% or 3% of their annual earnings in a healthcare spending account. Therefore, it's the same for everybody or different. And it was interesting. This idea came from a prospect that I was brought in to see a number of years ago, and they said, we're a German company, and our German head office from their human resource department said everybody's got to have the same benefits. And I said, fantastic, the same for everybody. So we have a really boring plan. Everybody has it. And you can tell he wasn't enthralled. He wasn't excited about his plan. He wasn't excited about anything, but he just said, so since we have to have the same benefit plan, we've got to find the cheapest solution. So, you know, let me know if there's a cheap way that we can buy this benefit plan. And I said, okay, well, before we, just give you any costs, let's talk about this for a minute. And we talked about plan design, and we talked about the groups within the group, and we talked about the same. It's got to be the same for everybody. And we said, fantastic. It's not the same for everybody because everybody's got a different long-term disability amount. So I was asking him questions, and he was going, well, I agree with that, but everybody has long-term disability. Okay. Then I said, what happens if we scale back your core plan and give everybody a healthcare spending account? And why don't we make it equal to, for example, 3% of your previous year's earnings? And that's the promise that you're going to make employees. And this guy had about 100 employees in his organization in Canada. And it was funny because all of a sudden you could see him thinking about it, thinking about it, thinking about it. And then the smile came over his face and said, great, this is the road we want to go down. Yeah, because it's the same for everybody, but it's different. Highly compensated people, which they had quite a few of, were going to have different benefits than everybody else, but they were going to be the same. Right. So you can add a minimum floor. Hey, everybody gets $1,000 minimum floor, for example, and then 3% of their earnings up to a certain maximum. But again, a great client retention idea. A great client retention idea. Very difficult to duplicate. Multiple companies with common ownership. We're seeing this an awful lot as well. Some, serial entrepreneurs might own a luggage factory, and they might own a dental office. I don't know. Well, they can own 3 or 4 different companies with that are not related other than through ownership. They're not in the same industry. They're just different things, different businesses. But what we say is great. Let's look at, pooling the pooled coverages, buying them, instead of you got 10 employees here, 10 employees here, and 10 employees in this company. Let's buy the benefits, the pool benefits for 30 people or whatever the numbers are. And then, that's going to give you some higher NEMs potentially and potentially lower costs as well. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take that and we're going to set up separate invoices for each company. So they're getting the joy, if you would, or the advantages of the whole group, but still each individual profit center, each company is a profit center, and you get separate medical and dental uh, advice with unique plan provisions that makes sense in that particular industry and to keep them away from their competition. And just a quick story, we had a client that had hotels across the country, and their benefit plans, we did exactly this. We bought the pooled benefits for all of their employees, but we separated the experience for each particular property. And they had a property in Banff, Alberta, and they had a property in Kingston, Ontario, where Jordan's from. And it's interesting because in Kingston, Ontario, the people that have worked there, that worked there for many years, there wasn't a lot of turnover. The group was a little bit older. Their experience was different than the experience from Banff. Everybody was 18 years old that worked in Banff. They worked there for about 6 months and then they left. It was a really high turnover type of environment. So again, benefit costs were different in those two properties, right? So it's important to manage those differently. Creative plan design ideas work. When clients have a creative plan, they tend not to look elsewhere because it's a plan that's set up for them. It's difficult to duplicate, and they've got their plan as opposed to just an off-the-shelf plan, easy to duplicate. The plan will actually work for them and then meet their specific needs. And once you buy something custom, it's pretty difficult to go back without a doubt. I use, shirts. I used to get these shirts made by a tailor, and they cost the same as you would buy at a reputable store, but they just fit better. They felt better. They were just better. Couldn't go off the rack again. Custom plans are hard to replicate, so it's really about building a fence around your client. So let's talk. We got 20 minutes to go or so. Let's talk about a couple of case studies. Family class consolidation. So the family owns three separate companies. They've got three separate plans, three separate bills. And in this particular case, when we were working with these folks, they had two different companies. They had two plans with one particular carrier and one plan with another carrier. Why it was like that, I don't remember. But all I knew is the existing arrangement was cumbersome and the plans were similar but had key differences. But there were five family members active in the business. There's five family members active in all three of the businesses. So they're running around doing different tasks. They might be in three different businesses in the same day, right? And these five family members, they were really focused on making these businesses successful and profitable and keeping their profit levels up and so on. But again, they were present in all three businesses all the time. But the family was frustrated with the restrictive plan that they had in place, and they were also frustrated with the cost plus because they found it cumbersome and difficult. And they go, oh yeah, I'd save up all my receipts and then I forget to send them in, or whatever the circumstances are. But it became frustrating for them. These are the things that we identify through questions, right? Through the questions. So we came back with the idea, hold on a second, let's consolidate the three plans into one plan with multiple divisions and classes. One thing they did have was a centralized administration person that was dealing with all of the bills and so on. And they were relieved to get one company bill instead of three. And we were able to separate on the bill the different divisions. So here's division one, division two, division three. So they get charged back the costs appropriately on their own internal accounting systems. And they were happy with the one bill and they were happy to work with one provider as well. We also set up a separate class of employees for the family and all of their spouses and children's. And so it was 100% reimbursement with unlimited coverage. So it was really simple, right? Each company has their own unique plan, one bill, simplified administration, and 100% owner class, without a doubt. The result was the client is extraordinarily happy. The family is happy because the workload for their administration person has been reduced substantially. The family gets to keep the three different plan designs, the three separate plan designs. There's separate financial statements that go to the client every single month, showing the different experience levels in each three companies, so they can see each company, each profit center, so they can see where they are on a month-to-month basis in relation to their budget. The family is extraordinarily happy with the unlimited plan that was put in place, and they ended up having claims in excess of $30,000 in the first year for the owners and their families. So this actually raised their costs. This actually raised their cost a great deal, as a matter of fact, and they were happy about it. How many times have you gone into a renewal where their costs are going up by 25% or 30%, and the client's happy about it because you've explained it, you've set it up in such a fashion, and they're aware of what they're going through. And you show them how much money they've saved in taxes, and they're going, thank you. Thank you, Ken, for bringing this plan to us. Oh my gosh, this is fantastic. Right? So it's when you set things up properly, it makes the renewals simple. It makes the renewals simple. You're also not looking over your shoulder every 2 seconds to make sure that somebody isn't following up behind you to give them a quote unquote better deal. Next one. This was a performance-based benefit plan that we'd set up. That's what we're calling this case study. But the employer wants to find a creative way to tie benefits into company performance. The company was it's one of those companies that is, that the company philosophy is they need to do extraordinarily well, and they share this information with all of their employees, how the company is doing, and they share it on a regular basis, and everybody's aware of the numbers, and it's performance-based compensation. They know that if the company does well, they're going to get paid more money and so on. And everything was, that rah, 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 let's go kind of philosophy in the organization, but they had this vanilla ice cream benefit plan in place. They just put something in place when they started, and it was boring. And the client said this: we have a vanilla ice cream plan. Life, AD&D, CI, medical and dental, 80% reimbursement. Yeah, pretty boring stuff, right? Pretty boring stuff. And the current plan doesn't mirror the compensation philosophy. And this is when we were talking with the client about compensation philosophy. This was really important because they go, everything we do is in this direction, but the benefit plan doesn't fit. And it was important for the client to understand this. And they certainly understood it, but it was important for the client to say, this doesn't match our compensation philosophy, and we're not spending money in a valuable way on these benefits. No one's caring about the benefits because they don't work. They work, but it doesn't feel right. It's a vanilla ice cream when you can go to, the dairy and get 47 different flavors, and everybody around you is, eating these things, but everybody's getting the vanilla ice cream. Not good. So what we said, fantastic. What we're going to do is we're going to change the medical and dental plan from 80% reimbursement to 75. We needed to change it to something because the idea was we wanted to get people's attention. So we said, let's change it from 75% reimbursement or 80% reimbursement to 75% reimbursement. We're going to keep all the pooled benefits in place, the life, the AD&D, the CI, et cetera. We're going to keep those in place. And we're going to add a healthcare spending account with a flat benefit of $500 per person. So that was going to keep them whole with that 80% reimbursement. That's what we felt. And the client was agreeable with that. And then additional funds were going to be added to the healthcare spending account based on the previous year's profit. Everybody knew the numbers. The numbers were set up or shared every single month with everybody in the organization. But they were going to be set up, and they were going to be shared they were sharing the information. So everybody knew what the numbers were. And then the idea was additional funds would be added to the healthcare spending account based on the previous year's profit. Simple as that. 5% of net profit was going to be divided equally to all members, all active employees of the plan. And it worked out that based on the previous year's profit, when we set this up, there was an additional $500 or $900 going into each person's healthcare spending account. So when we set up this plan, it went from 80 to 75%. The pool benefits stayed the same. And in this particular year one, when we set this up, everybody got that $500 plus $900, or in this case, $1,400 in their healthcare spending account. So this is a big benefit improvement for them, but they also know that it's tied in to the company's performance. And the other thing that we did, and it's not listed here, we kept the owner out of this, and we added an owner plan, that 100% plan that we talked about earlier, for him and his family. And it wasn't part of this, and it was, just a separate side deal. So they were really happy with that. The result was the employees were happy with the healthcare spending account being added because it's in that empowerment philosophy that is really from the top down through their business. The financial results are shared monthly, so they know where they're heading and know where they're trending, so there aren't any surprises. Employees are excited about the incentive and the increase in benefits, and the company, has noticed an increase in productivity but more importantly, they've got an increase in the perceived value of the plan. Great. I don't have a boring vanilla ice cream benefit plan. Fantastic. So it truly matches who they are, what their aura is. And it worked. And it worked extraordinarily well and continues to work. Case study number three, we got, union up here, but in this particular case, it was an employer in the hospitality industry. They were in a hotel, but they were having retention issues. The whole industry has retention issues, but these guys were having retention issues. And there was high turnover with less than 2 years of service. And turnover, as we all know, costs money because you've got new employee training costs. You've got, are they going to show up kind of philosophy and who's new today? It's that kind of thing. They also had a pretty standard plan in place, with life AD&D and 80% medical and dental plan. Again, a pretty vanilla plan, but there was a union lurking. There's a union lurking around trying to organize these folks saying our benefits are better than yours. We're going to work hard for you. You're going to pay us $50 a month in union dues, but we're going to get you better benefits. We're going to get you more time off. Whatever it is that the union was focusing on, but the biggest thing they were focusing on was the benefits. So, two problems: union lurking and turnover. All right, so what do you do? Well, we said, how about this? Why don't we lower the extended health and dental plan, the current plan that you've got offering? Why don't we lower that from 80% to 70% for year one? So you start with the company for the first year. Yeah, you got a pretty vanilla plan. Year two, we're going to increase it materially, in this case to 85%. So we're going to increase it to 85% for year two. So you last a year, great. You've gone through the training, you're working at the hotel. Now all of a sudden you get a 15% bump. You're going up to 85% reimbursement. Great. So that's kind of where we were matching the union plan. You're lasting for 2 years or more. Great. So for years, it should be years 3 and 4. Pardon me with that typo. Years 3 and 4, you get a 90% bump, 90% reimbursement for your medical and dental expenses. Great. And then year four, you get increased to 100% at the end of year four. So year four plus, you're in for 100%. We also added a healthcare spending account for employees with more than 4 years of service, and it started at $400 and then went up by $100 each year. So it was kind of interesting. And the union lurking was no longer lurking when we put this plan in place. Right? It was no longer lurking around because the employees really understood this. And who controls the employee groups? Well, the management, tries to, but it's the senior people, the senior employees that are telling the junior employees, no, stick around. This benefit plan works and it's way better and it's not worth paying the $50 a month in union fees. So the union kind of problem went away and the retention problem went away, right? The retention problem went away. It drastically improved. The union plan wasn't competitive and the employees felt valued. The employees felt incredibly valued. But then we saw some other things. The company culture improved due to the lack of turnover. If you always know the people that you're going to be working with, and it's not someone new every other Monday, fantastic. Customer satisfaction surveys drastically improved as well because you're not always spending all this time training people, and good employees that have been there a while know the standard of care and the standard of duty and the standard of service that they've got to provide for this particular brand of hotel. And the employees were incentivized to stay with the company. And the training costs substantially reduced and the benefit costs substantially increased. Now, but what was interesting is the training costs went way down, the benefit costs went way up, but the difference was the benefit costs went up, but it was still a lot less than what they spent on training. And you had all these improvements as well. So it was really interesting because what happened was we saw a significant increase in benefit costs when we set up this plan in year one, but then every year that went by, we saw a pretty significant increase. And, as accountants do, they change jobs. In this particular case, their internal accountant changed after about 5 years of running this plan. And, we made ourselves available to this particular individual anytime they wanted. And then About 6 months into the job, he called the advisor and me in for a rap session, and essentially was going to fire us because he said the benefit costs are out of control. I've seen how they've changed in the last 5 years, and this makes no sense to me. And I got to shop the market, and we're going to look at other advisors and so on. I said, fantastic. You do that, but hold on a second. Let's have a little history lesson here. And let's talk about why we did this and have this conversation with him. And then we overviewed the solution, and he goes, wow, I didn't know any of that, and I get that, and that makes more sense than yeah, we're good. And it went away. So you got to re-educate. You're never done with your clients. You're just starting with your clients. And you're never done. And when somebody important comes into a new job, make sure that they're aware of the history and the value that you bring to the table. But it's about taking time to understand your client. Just as Lawrence said, at the beginning there with the law firms, it's about taking time to understand your client. Your client is important. It's the partners that are important, as well as the bike courier. It's an important representative of your firm, and it's important to take the time to understand your client. We need to understand that client because the union was lurking around, but more importantly than that, they had these huge training costs. So how are we going to deal with that? And yes, we're talking about benefits, right? Eliminate your competition with creative plan design. That's what I like to say. But it's not me that creates the plan or you that creates the plan. It's the client that creates the plan. It's the client that creates a plan. And when that happens, renewals are easy. They're simple. Plan members are happy, and adding value matters more than finding the lowest cost, right? Lawrence, did you have something to add there?
No, I just thought
Yep.
I'd come in case there was a question.
Yep. Well, thanks. I just saw you come up there. Um, excuse me. So the advisor value add. I think how you can add value. Frame it in this way: show leadership, show your client direction. It's about leadership. They're looking at you as the expert. They look at Lawrence as the expert. They look at Blake, Sue, you're the expert. Ken, I'm picking on all you guys because you're on my screen right now. But you're the expert. So you know what? Lead. Lead. They're the expert in polishing widgets. They're the expert in mergers and acquisitions. They're the experts of heads and beds at hotels, right? But you're the expert in benefits. Show leadership. Show your client direction. Be creative. Show your client your capabilities. Instead of, hey, let me do the same thing and see if I can save you 10%. Well, no, that's boring. Show your client creativity. Show them capabilities. Show them relationship. Show your client confidence. You are the leader. Show them confidence, right? So, as we come close to the end of our session today, it's about asking the right questions. AI's got all the answers. The internet's got all the answers. Google it. They've got all the answers. What they don't have is the right questions. It's our job as professional advisors to have the right questions, right? And I think the most important thing is understand your client. Because not a whole, using that hotel as an example, they're not all the same. They're very different, and it depends on their geographic region. It's understanding your client. Again, Lawrence, and I hadn't thought about this before, but Lawrence, was mentioning that the law firm, everybody's walking around in three-piece suits on the 42nd floor of the First Canadian Place or wherever they are, but there's these bike couriers running around, in their clothes, delivering hundreds of packages a day. That's also part of the firm. They need to understand who their clients are. You need to understand who your clients are and all of their clients, all of their employees. And creative plan designs work because it's not you delivering the plan design, it's them choosing the plan design that makes sense for them. They take ownership in this. You've brought them to their end solution. They've painted their own picture because of the questions that you asked, and you understand the client. So it makes sense. We got a few minutes left. We're going to stop sharing for a minute, and we'll open it up to questions, ideas, discussions, and so on. We're going to ask you to stay tuned for our upcoming Zoomcasts. We're going to be announcing those dates shortly. So stand by and we will get those to you. But I'm going to stop sharing here. And any thoughts, ideas? You think I'm crazy? You think I'm nuts? What do you want to challenge, on what can we add to the conversation? What's important? Give me some examples of something that's worked for you and share it with the group. Anybody? Hello. Anybody?
Hey, Rob.
Hey.
Question for you. When you're working with a budget, but you want to also add these creativity elements, how do you navigate that with the ASO?
Hey, Bonnie, that's a great question, and thank you very much for asking that. And it's budgets are important. Everything's got to be a budget, right? But you you need to help by understanding the client, by understanding who the client is and by understanding what their needs are. It's about prioritization. It's about prioritization. Like, so for example, um, hey, we've got a budget for a trip. We're going to take a vacation. Well, fantastic. What's a priority for you on that vacation? Is it flying business class to Europe because you want to sleep and get there rested? Well, yeah, so I need to budget $10,000 for my flight to Europe, right? Because I'm not flying economy class because I'll have a sore back for an entire week. Or, hey, you know what? I don't need to stay in a hotel on the beach. I could stay in a hotel 2 blocks off the beach because I can walk and I don't mind staying off the beach, right? Or I need to stay on the beach because I need to hear the waves, right? So it's about prioritizing with the client because you can say, hey, you can have an unlimited budget, but if you've got a very specific budget, find out what's important and what's not, right? It's just like booking a vacation, right?
So
Lawrence?
on the same, oh,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say on that same line of thinking, if they do have, does this work best for when it's 100% employer paid? Or like how do you navigate that? Because often, of course, if the employee is paying the pooled benefits.
Yeah. It doesn't matter who's paying for it. Use the I would use that analogy about a vacation because everybody goes on vacations and everybody's got budgets for vacations, or most people have budgets for vacations, right? And it's just a matter of what's acceptable and what's not. Because that creates that overall philosophy, and it doesn't matter who pays what portion of it, right? But it's really that overall philosophy. One thing about healthcare spending accounts is it creates cost certainty as well. So by adding that element to a benefit plan, it can create that cost certainty and budget certainty. Sorry, Lawrence, you had a thought? Thank you, Bonnie.
The benefits are a line item on a budget. They're not a budget.
Yeah.
A budget is the global expenses. And if a corporation, an entity, has a budget, then what are the savings that can be occurred? What are the benefits that can be incurred? Rob, you talked about retention. Um, you know, I understand retention for younger generations is not as good as it is for us old people. We have nowhere to go. So it seems to me that you mentioned that Rob and you have different needs. Well, if you can identify how to best satisfy the needs for the younger people and do it economically within the budget, and so they understand that there is a global budget and that their bonus, for example, goes to a healthcare spending account if they're younger and they have a family. If they don't want that, what do they want?
Yeah.
I remember getting a group once just by asking the question, what's your biggest problem?
Yeah. What's your biggest hurt? What's your biggest problem? What's your biggest problem? And I knew this guy, and his name was Max Pasley, and he bought an airplane, or he sold an airplane and bought a new one. And the particular airplane that he bought was a Challenger, and it's a big corporate jet. And I was chatting with him. Actually, we were chatting in a hotel in Banff, and I said, Max, why did you buy? I'm just curious. Why did you buy the Challenger aircraft? And I know about this because a friend of mine was a pilot for the Challenger aircraft. In other words, to Lawrence's point, what's the hurt? Why did you go from this particular Cessna aircraft that you had to a Challenger aircraft? I'm just curious on your thought process. And he goes, Rob, I'm too old and I've made too much money in my life to have to bend over to pee when I'm on my plane. I wanted to be able to stand up and pee. And this is a true story. True story, right? I wanted to be able to stand up and pee. So can you imagine him going to the jet field where they buy jets and he goes, this one looks neat. Can I see the bathroom? Yeah, I'll take it. But what's the hurt? As Lawrence said, what is the hurt? And the hurt could be a budget, the hurt could be this, but nothing is free. We all know that, right? So it's it's about prioritization. And this particular guy's priority was his comfort. Simple as that, his comfort. My priority when I go on vacation, and we booked a trip, we're going to go to Vimy Ridge November 11th for the Canadian Remembrance Day ceremony over there. But you know what? It's not. I got to fly business class. I don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to sit in the back of the plane and be uncomfortable for that long. It'll ruin the trip. So we're not going to go unless we can afford to do this. Great, because that's a priority. Right? So it's about that. Anyways, benefits. We're over time here. Thank you all very much. You're going to be signed up for the CE credit, or you're going to get your CE credit from Mike, number one. Number two, you're going to get a survey. Tell us how we did, how we can do it better tomorrow, future subjects you want to see. This subject came out of the survey that we received from you, ideas that we received from you. You're going to be signed up for a newsletter. Check our website. We're going to be sending out some information to you with future dates. Thank you for your input and feedback and so on. And we wish you great selling and enjoy the rest of the summer.